Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter.
Welcome to all our viewers and listeners of another episode of the CPG Guys. You can find all our content on cpgguys.com. And here we discuss everything in store, brick and mortar, online, e-commerce, media, and omnichannel, and the rapid transformation of the digital CPG moving 800 miles an hour. Today is a very special episode because I have here a friend and an ally in the journey of digital transformation. But most importantly, I get to chat today along with Peter with the world's most elite retailer closest to my heart, one that has driven over 20-25% of people's business models over the course of time in fast-moving consumer goods. And I want to welcome my co-host Peter to the show. Peter, of course, is the loyalty CRM data guru and wizard and has been the CPG Guy's funny face now for the 6 months, providing you comic relief during COVID. So welcome, Mr. Peter Bond.
Sri, you're the Bill to my Ted, the bow to my arrow, the Bosnia to my Herzegovina. Always good to go on this journey with you. Best part of the week is doing these podcast episodes. And today it's a really special one.
And y'all know the only reason we do this is because Peter has a list of 1,000 equivalents of the Bosnia to my Herzegovina, and I just want to get them all out. That's about the only reason we do this podcast called CPG Guys. And while all you
3,000 episodes, Sri, just so you know.
I can't wait, man. I can't wait. I need all these analogies. So that said, folks, we'd love for you to listen to our podcast at tinyurl.com/Apple CPG podcast, where you can download and listen to it at will. And while you're there, Peter and I would really appreciate it if you could leave us a rating and a review as well. And without much further ado, I want to welcome, like I said, an ally in the change of digital transformation and a leader of media at the world's most elite retailer, Walmart, and the head of beauty of WMG, Mr. Matthew Smith. Welcome.
Woo, that sounded official. That was great. Thank you guys for having me and for making it clear from the outset that dry humor is welcome. So I'm going to have to ad-lib between my notes here on the questions and make sure that I
bring it. We want it. Absolutely want it.
Peter, also thank you for improving my headshot. I think the cartoon effect is one that we'll have to keep moving forward. Big improvement. And as I said, Sri is a friend. So as a true friend, I'd be lying if I said that he didn't text me daily in advance of this recording asking me to eat only honey, right? So that my voice would hold out for the 45 minutes or so. It's great to be here with you guys. Titans of industry that you are. Thank you for having me.
This is going to be good, Sri. I'm already liking it.
I can't wait to get started. And I think I shortchanged Matthew a little bit when I said he heads just beauty for WMG. He also leads health and consumables. So I want to make sure that I do say that. So, welcome again to the show, Matthew. So why don't we jump right into it? Again, I'm thrilled to have someone from Walmart and the Walmart Media Group. And the first question is actually very straightforward and an easy one for you, Matthew, which is, if I look at 2020, you and I were together at CES earlier in Las Vegas this year, and we were discussing opportunities on WMG for my alma mater, Revlon. Mm-hmm. But 2020 is shaped nothing like what you and I in that room could have possibly thought it would. I've also seen Walmart has really stepped up in all things digital and e-commerce in 2020. The recent announcement of Walmart Plus, drone testing in Fayetteville, click and collect penetration seems to be growing every single day. And now there's a partnership with Instacart. What's your perspective? Like, where's this headed?
Well, I keep waiting for the drone to land. Apparently, I'm not on the alpha list, but it's.
You got to live in Fayetteville first.
I'd be lying if I said there weren't thoughts that go through the back of my mind about when I'm going to get that email, right? With the new HQ being built. But happy in Hoboken for now. Look, I'll say it's actually a great question to start with, which is it's all just a response to the customer. And if we, meaning Walmart, if we've been for decades all about, we're full of acronyms, right? EDLP, right? Everyday low prices, saving money essentially. And then increasingly lately, in the past few years, saving time as well. So, doubling down on the promise, saving not just money, but saving time. If that's the customer mindset and that's the customer need we're filling, you have to acknowledge the customer doesn't think in channels. So we use the term omni-channel here, but customer doesn't think that way. They think in terms of utility. So if omni retail, has to flex to become more seamless, more effortless, platform agnostic, to be sure, then omni retail advertising has to, and do so as well invariably. And I think, why now? Why the big push that you're seeing? And we see the math, right? Frankly, it's the math that got me, hired. That really piqued my interest in this adventure. Is we've got 3 to 5 years to do what Amazon did in 15, and Amazon has 3 to 5 years to do what we've done in several decades. And for us, where that growth curve really hits is in digital. That's the side of Omni where we have obviously the most long-term growth potential. So I think the customer at the center, and everything else you mentioned is a symptom of trying to answer that need, I would say. Make sense? Or does that feel lofty?
No, I feel it's lofty, but as you said, the most important magic word, the customer, aka the shopper, the consumer, is right at the center. You can't go wrong with that model.
And I'm still waiting on my drone. I really am.
Matthew, thank you for joining us. Before I get into my question, I'll make mention of the fact that my wife is completely obsessed with Back to the Future. And so the fact that the click and collect commercials included the DeLorean made her love you even more. In any event, so I'm going to get on to Shree's favorite topic, which is what you do, retail media. That's been around for quite a while, but 2020 marked a difference for Walmart. You showed up at CES. It was a core component of Top to Tops. And this was pre-pandemic, what was the catalyst, or were there any notable catalysts that kind of said this is the year that it's going to be a big difference?
Specific to CES, where Sri, did we meet for the first time at CES? Remind me.
Yes, we actually did.
Yeah. And I think we had agreed that it would stay in Vegas, but here we are, right? So, but Peter, yeah, it's funny. CES, Walmart and Walmart Media Group actually had been attending CES for a lot of years, as I understand it. I've been with the company about 1.5 years now. So this past January was the first time I went to CES with Walmart. Been there several times before in the career, but I would say this was definitely the first year that we were there in a big way. But not an isolated event in terms of, our overall go-to-market strategy. We've also been doing, quite a few high-touch engagements with large advertisers. We had a large inaugural event last year in New York, where we brought advertisers in from across the country for sort of our, coming out party, our upfront style showcase for what, the year ahead would bring from WMG. So I think specific to CES and a lot of these, big dog and ponies, from an insider's perspective, I'd say it's just an indicator of how seriously Walmart and WMG is taking the business now, and what it means, and the sort of the conspicuous places you need to appear and be present and engage key stakeholders in the industry. I would say it's also a lot of fun, but I think you'll see more of it as we definitely work to grow the org and move up the funnel.
There's no debate that in this journey of digital transformation, this is going to be a lot of fun, because not only is this a moment of transformation, it's a moment of learning for every single one of us, and in that spirit, this is definitely a learning moment for brands, as I mentioned up front, for many, many brands, hundreds and thousands of brands, the Walmart business represents the single largest business from a channel standpoint, as well as more importantly, from a relationship standpoint. So I personally humbly see the opportunity with WMG as an extension of shopper marketing, as an extension of media opportunities, just a surround sound opportunity to grow brand equity with an amazing retail partner. And with that as the backdrop, Matthew, what has the response generally been from brands in the last year and a half you've been in this role? Do brands understand that this is actually a media moment for amplification and brand equity development with the reach and audience that Walmart has? And it's not just a sales conversion vehicle. I myself might have, in a different role, sitting across the table, might have actually hijacked a conversation into we got to deliver the numbers and conversion. But I know deep in my heart that's not the right conversation. The right conversation is amplification and brand equity development. Are you seeing that?
That's a big question. This one might take a while. That you really stuck your finger on it, Sri. I mean, I think, and it's interesting for me, coming from a career that began on the agency side, doing boutique sort of niche work, to traditional media, print, to traditional publisher-based digital, to to startups, to mobile, to social, and to now. This is my first real sort of, let's call it retail, right, gig, and I found it kind of ironic that I would enter this sort of a role at this time when retail should be actually getting closer, retail media that is, getting closer to what traditional, right, has largely been producing historically. And I think, so to put that in perspective, we're about a year into insourcing the business from Triad, who previously handled the Walmart advertising business. And we built, a team from double digits to mid triple digits in that time. To your question, about the response from brands, been phenomenal, but complex, I would say, because of that history lesson. Because retail media, and this is my opinion, because retail media was historically a last mile only solution, dealing mainly with shopper marketing stakeholders. That at that time, the line between, I think, trade dollars, for example, and ad dollars was, I believe, more opaque then. And since both were essentially paid by a shopper marketing lead who was choosing, between two different retailer clients, let's say one is a merchant client and one is a media client, our purpose, and I think what hooked me on WMG is, the big math in the long game is really to break out of that mold, break out of that predefined shopper marketing exclusive conversation, which does not actually reflect the customer journey today, right, and where she is. And then delivering that to our suppliers so that they can actually engage our customers across a much larger swath of that purchase funnel. And so, I'm going to geek out a bit here, but what's exciting about that, I think, is, and maybe perhaps surprising to some of our listeners, is that, by moving retail media up the funnel, you actually move us closer to our merchant counterparts, right? Which might seem counterintuitive because of the aforementioned comments about, trade versus media. But as an example, and we'll use Revlon, Sri, right? So you weren't there in 1995, I know that, but if you had been, and you
I was still in school, sorry.
But if you'd been at Revlon in 1995, and you were to bring a major, innovation to the beauty merchant at, say, the world's largest retailer, right? They would likely have attached a media ask to that, and not a media ask, on their own retailer.com, because it probably didn't exist. It would have been something like, okay, Sri, yes, we'll take this innovation from Revlon, and you need to, run $50 million in national daytime TV network, right? And you need to point those ads to our retailer, right? Pretty common. Fast forward, let's say 10 years, 05, maybe that expands to include a digital buy, right? Where we're driving clicks now to the retailer's website. And then fast forward again, recently, let's say 15, and they'd start pointing social and influencer campaigns to the retailer site. But, across that whole 20-year swath, what likely would not have changed is that any ads that ran directly on the retailer's site, would have been funded exclusively by a shopper marketing budget, right? By a person who's trying to decide how much of that to put into ads and how much of it to put into trade, and honestly, with the merchants at that retailer probably preferring to get the trade bucks, right? Because they were already getting the air cover, from the national TV buys and the social and whatnot, Suppliers like you, Sri, at Revlon, or your sales leads were already on the hook to use your national media, to get people to the party. And I think, the huge shift that we've seen, and what's exciting is, the game changer today, and I'll use WMG as an example, because of our ability to target with precision and scale, using an enormous shopper database, not just on our own site, but to leverage that anywhere in the digital ecosystem. And I'll use your language here. I think you might have said, is this a media moment? It's absolutely a media moment, because what it does is it catapults that conversation totally beyond the last mile conversion. Not that it's not important, it's still a part of it, but it's not the only part of the conversation. And, it allows us to start having conversations about upper funnel tactics like awareness driving, consideration, intent. And those are not the domain traditionally of shopper marketing budgets. That's where the national brand budgets sit. And so, I think when a major retailer has a major retail media component that can become a really effective sales driver, and then also, let's not forget, a fantastic profit center, which is essentially what our merchants are on the hook for, right? Then you get the merchants on your team. And, because what the merchants see is, you're a tactic that they can use to actually drive their sales, right? So if in 95, 50 million from Revlon went to a TV buy to get people to the party, in 2020, I have every incentive as a merchant to use our in-house media arm, because I know they can do it just as well, right? So I think that conversion absolutely gets us out of the conversation of shopper marketing, and I think it absolutely makes this, to use your words, a media moment. So that was a lot, guys. Feel free to shoot holes.
No, but sincerely, thank you for that explanation, because, for the longest time, I felt that brands were looking at retailers and saying, hey, you guys are not leading this journey, right? This is not us. But I genuinely believe for the first time, this is now on brands. It's really through education, brand leadership. CMOs need to really learn that a partnership on retail media is a media amplification moment. And you gave such a great example of the TV spot that used to come by, and merchants would ask on the retailer side for, hey, what is the surround sound amplification plan that's going to drive traffic to the store in the first place? This is not radically different. Off-site targeting into a retail.com environment is no different than a TV ad that sends you to the store. And that's, I think, the magic moment. So thank you for that explanation.
All right, Shri, we've been way too nice to Matthew. Turn on the floodlights and zoom in on his face. We're going to grill him for numbers now.
Whoa.
Seriously, though, we always like to ask this, and whether it's an absolute or a relative or a percentage, can you give us any dimension to how you've seen growth in Walmart's share of the media landscape?
Yeah, so I'll say yes and no, Peter, and probably at least no in the way that you intended the question, I suspect, which is in terms of like sort of gross metrics. There's the table stakes of uniques and impressions and just conversions and views and everything else we've seen. But I think the nature of what we're doing at WMG, and I found it interesting a year ago when we started going into the major holding companies, we were often posed that question: how many uniques do you reach? How many? What's your traffic? But because our success metric is so different, because it is purely, not only but mostly, attributable sales, right? Things like CPM, things like reach, things like uniques, things like viewability. These are obviously, these are table stakes in the industry, and there's thresholds you have to hit. But because what we ultimately report on and our value prop is actually not reach, right, and not audience. We took the Walmart audience, right, and we sliced and diced it and targeted it and engaged it in a way that delivered ROAS, so return on ad spend. So literally, our advertisers, the means to the end, of course, would be reach and a certain amount of impressions needed, based on the targeting to hit the sweet spot and get the conversion, and we back into those KPIs. But those are sort of, those are a means to an end, I would say, because ultimately what we report on is, Brenda 2643 in Albuquerque, saw the ad on Tuesday, and then she loaded up the basket, and on Friday she checked out, and we can attribute those sales. Or she saw the ad, on Tuesday, and she didn't check out online, but she came to her local Albuquerque, Walmart store, and she checked out there, either with credit card or with cash, actually. And so a big part of our model is attributable sales. What do the suppliers spend? and what did they get back. I will say, to give a round number, with Walmart hitting about 160 million shoppers every week and reaching 95% of U.S. households across the year. That's a pretty strong barometer of the size of the audience we're targeting. I hope I didn't sidestep your question too much.
No, that was great, and thank you for going into detail on that. Honestly, our audience appreciates learning, and whatever you can share, they're more than happy to consider. So thank you for that.
Sure.
So Matthew, you mentioned means to an end, upper funnel, lower funnel. We discussed a little bit about the metrics. 160 million is a whopping large number. So I think it would help our audience a lot to really take a deeper dive down into all the various offerings WMG have. And it'll be awesome if you could actually share for us all the various things, because traditionally an e-commerce leader with a selling responsibility really focuses on SEM and maybe holiday banner ads, and media and amplification is about 20 things more. So I'd love for you just to explain what those various opportunities are for brands on this platform.
Yeah, well, that's great. I'll say for the most complete answer, you can go to walmartmedia.com, which is where you can download a media kit and send an email to somebody.
Sorry, Matthew, could you repeat that URL for us?
It'll be walmartmedia.com.
Thank you.
ALMARTMEDIA.com, where you can find not only a media kit, but probably a very willing person on the other end who's more than happy to receive an inbound and get you whatever you'd like. But
right.
I'll go back to the first question, the way I answered it, Sri, which is, if the customer's at the middle, right, then I think your tactical, your toys that you can sell, right, have to be customer centric and have to acknowledge where is the customer. So, first you got to divide the ecosystem and decide, where do we engage that customer? So, certainly now on the Walmart site, there are a lot of tactics we can use. One insight we had a while back is that, IAB standard creative was not doing the lifting that we thought it should be doing. And so we actually pivoted to entirely native custom built creative on walmart.com. And so we don't run, supplied assets on the site. And we've actually seen huge lifts in performance because of that. And so that, that's also part of a sort of central, Walmart customer and marketing and just overall, UX sort of philosophy to make ads that customers love, as you'll probably see if you download the media kit. So that's probably the first call out you'll notice when you come to the site is native creative, custom created by campaign and by supplier, so that we can best resonate with the shopper. And we can obviously use all sorts of targeting, leveraging our data from contextual to behavioral to propensity, in market, et cetera. So that's display on the site. Also on the site, of course, the last mile search component. And I'll say, search is an area we've really been leaning into. More immediately when we were, sitting in Hoboken with our e-com teams, and now with the merger to an omni org at Walmart as an overall driver for sort of last mile. So typical, suspects there. In terms of search tactics, I'll say it's a big and continued area for growth as Walmart, really puts the gas on e-com. And, beyond those two sort of core fundamental tactics, you think about, all right, where else is our shopper, right? Because if we can find them, anywhere in the ecosystem, where should we find them and how should we sort of plus up that engagement? So got a big offsite part of our portfolio where we can essentially tap, large audience buys and social buys and other tactics, but using the intelligence of what we know about, Brenda in Albuquerque, and finding her and helping her further up that funnel to come to us. We also have things called brand experience pages or brand pages, where we can focus more on education and awareness and engagement, which work particularly well for launches and relaunches and anything that tends to correlate to maybe big bets with our merchant friends or innovations where a product might not have yet, that organic search relevancy because people haven't been searching for it because it hasn't existed, right? So where education is needed, we can do that in tandem with what suppliers are doing, in their own social and in their own O&Os. We can be doing that on the Walmart O&O as well. The other big thing I'll say is that's been a big push for WMG, and I think certainly a step up from the previous capabilities before we in-house the business is, we immediately got closer to the merchants when we did that. And so you think about the kind of product you can offer a supplier in terms of ads when you're closer to the merchants. It's a function of how you're doing joint planning with the merchants. So suddenly things like seasonal integrations, whether it's Walmart seasonals like Valentine's Day or back to school, Halloween, holiday, et cetera, or even going more granular, into things like allergy season, cough, cold, flu, spring cleaning, being able to coordinate and actually do, large package sort of experiences that are in lockstep with the merchants has been a big part of the strategy this year. And I think the last thing I'll say there, which is a bit of a nod towards what's coming up is Omni. And when I say Omni, increasingly activations in the store, right? So if the 4,500 plus stores are the USP for us, versus a lot of other retailers now, how can we level up the engagement of shoppers in the store, right, or around the store? And so can't say a lot about that other than that there are a lot of innovations happening, and I think you'll see a lot of that coming, in the weeks and months ahead. And I'll just, let me just plus and layer on one thing, which is, while I just did sort of a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the audience, it's not the way we go about, our media strategies with our clients. It's actually the opposite, which is we start with an objective, which is, again, table stakes, but and Sri, you'll recall we did this at Revlon, which is what is your KPI, right? So if historically WMG was, really about shopper marketing and really e-com sales, right? What are we now? No, we have tactics to drive store sales. We have tactics to drive, omni sales. We have tactics to drive conversion. We have tactics to drive awareness, new buyers, right? Lapsed buyers, whatever. So really critical that you start with the KPI and then reverse engineer the plan. And not lead with the shiny toy, although, there's still will be a little bit about that, I'm sure, in our JVPs and our top suppliers, but mostly it's about, reverse engineering and using those tactics in order to meet the KPI, I'd say.
Yeah, Matthew, I'll make a general plea to brands and, advice, plea, call it what you may. It's a humble one, which is, brands have invested a lot of time with AMG getting into the weeds of the tactics. Step up, folks. Invest time, get into the weeds with WMG, understand every single tactic, and as Matthew just said, reverse engineer what's best for you. But take time to understand every single tactic that's out there.
Yeah, what I also heard, Sri, was not only the tactics, but the ones that bundle right to address one end of the omni-channel spectrum to the other, and frankly, everything in between. So that's terrific. So in my role at Power Reviews, I do work with Walmart. I work mostly with the labs team out in California.
Oh, cool.
Content. And what I've come to know more recently is that Walmart has been unifying the merchandising responsibilities of digital and physical. And as such, my question to you is, does this mean that we can expect your group to be much more front and center in kind of top to tops and JBPs between the merchants and the brands that are selling their products for you?
Well, as a salesman, I'll say I hope so, right? But no, not no, yes. But let me qualify that, which is
okay.
One of the first.
Matthew, I have no doubt in my mind this is going to happen.
Yeah, so let me back up and say I'll go to like probably week 1 at Walmart, which was, one of the very first lessons you're taught. Well, the first lesson you're taught is, who's number one? The customer always, right? But in terms of the way the company works, the power centers are very clearly, with the merchants, right? With the people who command, influence.
Which is fair. I mean, that's the way it should be, right? Because they have the pressure of actually delivering the number for Walmart, but also keeping your customer, the shopper, happy.
Yeah. So, somebody that commands tens or, many tens or maybe $100 billion, of revenue is always going to be front and center in that room. I think, to refer back to, the previous point, making our case and building our trust and instilling confidence in the merchants that WMG or that any really that's the task of any retail media group, right? Is if you want the support of your merchants where the power centers are, you have to earn it, right? Which means you have to learn their business, you have to understand their business. I know a good amount, not everything, but pretty good amount about how some parts of media work. A year and a half ago, I knew next to nothing about how retail worked, right? And even today, I know a fraction of what any level of merchant at Walmart knows. And so we've spent a lot of time working on those relationships and sort of humbly approaching that power center to learn about the retail, because essentially we've said, we work for you. We're now a tactic. For why maybe, at 95, that $50 million TV buy at Revlon, maybe now that should be 60, because you should also be doing 10 million with Walmart Media Group or whoever. So, it takes a lot of relationship building and trust building to flip that switch. And so some background that I think important for your question, which is, are we going to be in the room now? And I think, yeah, we will be in the room. We're in the room because, in many cases we've done the work to earn a seat at the table. But our seat at the table will always be, as one component among many that our merchants and increasingly, our customer org and all the stakeholders need to drive the business forward. So I think to level down a little bit, yeah, quite literally, sure, you're going to see us in JP conversations, and you're going to see, more coordination around that between the media org and the merchant org. And I think that's really positive. We're not there yet, but we're working towards it. So I think where you land on that is, we exist to help our suppliers succeed at Walmart, and that's really a big part of how Walmart succeeds with the customer. So invariably, that's going to mean we spend more time with suppliers and merchants, and increasingly more time with those two cohorts, together in the same room.
A key takeaway I hear is that you're in the room because your solutions have earned the right to be in that room as part of the mix. And that's what's going to keep you there. But ultimately, it is the merchant who's going to drive the discussion, making sure that the brand understands how they're investing successfully.
Well, I mean, I'll say yes and no on that, which is, there's a parallel conversation, a very robust conversation happening between WMG and our ad buyers directly, right, and the brand marketers directly. And so I'll say, we're parallel pathing now, I would say, in a way, particularly with the top suppliers, because the top suppliers are looking at WMG, I think, and I won't speak for them, but again, we're one component of how to drive their success at Walmart. So invariably, that's going to merge into a larger conversation. That's going to have a large merchant sitting at the table. But on the other hand, we have a lot of really great campaigns and partnerships with advertisers who are not necessarily huge bets for merchants, but which actually are really strong advertising partnerships with WMG. And I think in particular, when you get out of the, let's say top 100 or 150, what we call global accounts, a huge and growing torso and tail, long tail of smaller advertisers, particularly as we become more digitally relevant, who are never going to get, face time with a senior merchant, and they won't need to, because we'll have automated tools that they can use to achieve the task they need to. So I'd say we're parallel pathing, always, but we're definitely getting more airtime in that room with the merchants, and we have to respect that, and we have to treat that really, really preciously, I would say.
Yeah, and you know what? Growth as a partnership is not a single unit ecosystem where it's just WMG. It is the merchant. There's so many more factors that actually develop growth. But again, very naively and humbly, I'll submit for brands, folks, this is the moment to step your game up with Walmart and Walmart Media. Do not miss the bus for those that missed the bus. Hopefully it'll come back, because Matthew's just a nice guy and he'll bring the bus back for you. But don't miss the moment, and which leads me to a very tactical question, which is campaign execution. So now you've worked with your teams, Matthew, and the various teams on Walmart Media, and a brand has decided to execute a certain campaign. You mentioned the word automated tools. Is the platform largely a self-serve platform? You control the campaign. Is it hands-on, hands-off? Do you get a team to work with? How are metrics reported? How does one even agree on the metrics upfront, and then how is it reported post metrics? Could we get into the actual tactical details of start to finish how a campaign is born and then what happens post?
Absolutely, sure, yeah. I'll say first. I'll say if you saw my hand shaking, it's because I have carpal tunnel now from signing about 40 IOs a day, which is a way.
We might have to explain the details of that joke for our listeners. I'm just kidding, Matthew.
IOs, insertion orders, contracts, right? Yeah, money.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Sometimes I tend to. You and I have lived in the world of media. I'm a sales guy, but like you, but I've lived in the world of media. IOs is a way of life because I've done it last 7-8 years. A lot of people just don't know what IOs mean.
Yeah, a lot of prisma in my day. I'll say, and that's half joking, but also half serious, because what that's meant to sort of convey is, I'd say we're midstream right now on the managed service versus self-service, right? And if you start from again the big math, the long-term vision, of course, in any digital vendor, anyone who wants to make money in the ads business, whether you're retail or traditional or social or whatever you are, automation is the key. And so if you're not embracing automation, you're never going to be able to meaningfully scale the business. And so when we in-house the business about 1.5 years ago, we've been operating largely as managed service, which is to say, you get an RFP, you get a brief from a supplier and or their agency. Often with our larger suppliers, it's their agency, which is typically a member of a large holding company. And that part of the process works very much like even non-retail media, right? You go through the RFP process, you submit a media plan, and you go through some negotiation, and then you agree, and you convert that into an actual contract, and then you log it into PIO and you traffic it. And so I think the typical launch cadence for managed service, in some cases we're still doing that. We're doing it at much larger tickets. In a much more complex way, because we're doing it across so many different kinds of products. But I'd say that's what we have inherited, but it's certainly not the vision for the future. And so, as I mentioned, our torso and tail, which is our mid-market, what we call our SMB folks, that list of hundreds of advertisers that are not necessarily the largest, but largest in number, right, and an increasing part of our revenue model. A lot of those folks are on self-service, right? So I think we've been parallel pathing. I use that term a lot, but on how to continue to provide white glove service to the top suppliers that need it, while really driving forward on the automation tools. And I think Sri, you would have seen the announcement in CES, which was the launch of the first ever API integration, and a number of search partners that allow our top suppliers to book and manage search directly. You're going to see more of that. I think you're going to see quite a bit of new products, becoming available on our API, and just generally a big push towards automation. The white glove will I don't think ever go away, because we're always going to need the special eyes on really critical business. But I think the shift in white glove, it changes from hands-on keyboards, building IOs, building media plans, really tactical work. It shifts, the pie chart towards strategy and towards really consultative selling. And I think, that was the big, probably, I keep saying these, things that brought me to WMG, but one of them was definitely that promise of, building an insights business, building a consultative sales structure that relies not on this, manual trading of insertion orders and RFPs, but which I think is increasingly table stakes, but more on what is the vision, what do we have to accomplish, and really elevate the way we work with partners to really what that word should mean, which is a true partnership. So I think you're going to see a lot of that in the form of increased automation in the weeks and months to come.
Thank you, Matthew. Sri and I both believe very firmly that the road to retail success for a brand goes right through Walmart. But given the fact that the balance in the omni-channel of the 4,500 physical stores and the volume going that versus what's going through Walmart.com is not exactly one-to-one. So I'm kind of curious as to, from the perspective of WMG, are you to the point now where you're actively going out and seeking the brands that are selling and working to get them into the program, or is it more a reaction to what their level of interest in as they come to you?
Yeah, I'd say to kick off and play back, the head, torso, tail model.
Yep.
The head being our top suppliers. That's always going to be very intentional, right? Because again, these are the complex conversations where multiple stakeholders at the supplier and at Walmart are always going to be discussing how supplier ABC needs to win at Walmart. That's not going to be the case for many startups or many basement ventures, which still need to win by advertising last mile and winning in search on Walmart.com, or let's be honest, Amazon or who else.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to continue to see the intentionality behind those top suppliers, but a lot of the torso and tail, which I won't speak for a lot because it's not really my area of expertise, is inbound and probably marketplace driven, in the future. But what I'll say is, look, when you again consider 160 million shoppers a week, right, between the stores and the .com. Basically, all Americans will touch a Walmart and shop there in the year. I think a retail media org's unique value proposition, and I think ours uniquely among retail media groups, is the same unique value prop that Walmart would probably claim among other retailers, which is we're both clicks and bricks, right? We're omni. And we are doing that at the largest scale, right? So if historically, let's say WMG would have relied on digital engagement to drive an omni purchase, and we would use a variety of tactics that could drive e-com sales versus store sales or vice versa. I think, to your point, display media on our O&O as well as on the offsite, it's always going to be our largest driver for in-store sales. And so we can attribute those to ad spend. So I would say to your question about one-to-one, and as we look at the growth of the .com, versus, will the store footprint, meaningfully grow, at the same clip as digital? Certainly not, right? And I'm not in operations at Walmart, but we all understand the big math there. I'd say in terms of the vision, though, while digital growth is certainly mission critical, it's going to be how we win. More than 80% of retail transactions, which you guys know, still happen inside a brick and mortar store, which every time I hear these stats, I'm like, it's just not a sexy stat that people report on. It's not, you don't see it trending.
It's a big number.
You don't see it trending on LinkedIn, right? But it's a huge, huge number. So it's like, you can't miss the forest, for the trees. And, any retail media org that has any sense of scale, in the bricks has to deliver on that, right? Has to keep driving on that. And so, we have to do both. We have to have one leg on each side, I think. And so there's an immediate opportunity for retailers to bring, ad innovation directly into the stores, and to do so at scale. And that's a big part of our omnichannel strategy. So, I'll say, to summarize that, we certainly have ground to make up in fully engaging, against the current digital audience and then driving the scale of that digital audience. But there's equally huge opportunity to increase touch points and value, smartly in the store or around the store. And so can't speak in a lot of detail about that because, that's probably something hiding behind your confidentiality slide. But yeah, it's really exciting to be able to do both and focus on both.
The brand equivalent to your analogy in terms of the online versus the offline sales, put in Shree's and my terms of big beverage, is Coke and Pepsi love to talk about all of the emerging brands that they've got and the hydration and the nutrition. But at the end of the day, the big business for both of those companies from a beverage perspective is still carbonated soft drink.
When one
they wouldn't appreciate that, because when I worked with Coke, they were about happiness. And I know we have listeners who work for Coke or work with Coke, but I do think that I agree, Peter. That's fascinating about what is the tip of the spear versus what is the meat and potatoes? What's in the sausage factory that keeps the lights on? You know what I mean? Yeah.
So interestingly, Matthew, both Peter and I have at some point in our career both worked on and at PepsiCo in some capacity, and at various brands too. But when one has fun and you get into such a meaty topic, which is media and Walmart media, again at the world's most elite retailer, time just flies by. So I'm going to wrap it up with this one last question, which is really, we talked about 4,700, 4,500 plus stores. The reach is phenomenal. We talked about the stat of the 80% of transactions approximately take place in store. One of the very important pieces of that in-store model is Impulse, aka the industry lovingly calls Department 82, even outside of Walmart, for Impulse. That important to brands.
Is that like Area 51 tree? Is that
like Area 50? Let's call it Area 51. It's magical, but things happen there.
Yeah,
and it's and maybe you don't know a lot about it, but you can see it all the time. You read about it, that kind of thing. But without, Department 82 has a very important role to play for many brands, and it's really driving impulse. How does WMG look at driving impulse, and are there tactics, any special, are there any advice you could put out there for brands, etc., on how to partner with Walmart Media and driving impulse? Because in many businesses, impulse is a very important part of their success.
Yeah. I'll admit, Sri, when we talked about this, I had to go look up what Department 82 was, but I did, and I gave some thought to this.
I'll apologize. I use it loosely for impulse. I mean, having spent 24 years in CPG in multi-brands, it's just become a vocabulary word.
It's not a dry lake bed north of Las Vegas, just to be clear.
Yeah, I know a lot of D's, but 82 was one I had to look up, and then immediately after that, I thought I had visions of my grandmother buying the Inquirer, at register.
There you go.
Look, I'll say, look, obviously, yeah. I mean, historically, WMG, I guess, I think our role for Impulse, would have been less about driving the impulse at register and more about, driving those impulse, the categories behind them, right, on shelf or online, right? So.
Yep.
Driving awareness, or for an intentional planned trip to the store, right? Let's say around Halloween, for that 10-pack of the candy bar, or to drive a click and conversion for the same thing online. So I think what's interesting is store pickup and store pickup focused drivers, which WMG and other retail orgs do. That presents an interesting opportunity and also a challenge, for Impulse, because it accelerates sales for these suppliers, right, for those products, by answering that customer need, which is that you don't always have to go inside the store. You don't always have to go inside, right? Yeah. So, but there's an impact on the impulse buys at register, clearly. So I think one of the really exciting things about, as I said before, more innovative ad experiences within the store, right, is absolutely how to sort of make up that gap or delta, right, at register with impulse buys. That's all I can say about it. But I'll say we certainly have our finger on it. Yeah.
I'll just say this.
Something's coming.
Understand this, that when it comes to impulse and the register, when beverage drivers go into the store to stock, the first thing they do is stock the register area, the register coolers. And when they leave, the last thing they do is go back to make sure it's full. And there's a reason for that.
I think there could be a really fun meme or some, I don't know, maybe a slideshow that shows photos of the impulse rack, right? Like from 1970, like to present, like every 5 years, and just look at like the, like when did earbuds, enter the impulse rack?
Or USB cables.
Or USB cables, when did certain, candy bars go off shelf because, certain chemicals, or, when did the health craze start? I think it'd be really interesting. So I don't know, maybe we challenge our listeners, somebody to come up with that. That would be really fun.
Yeah, actually, what a great idea. You know what? Peter and I would be happy to take on this as a contest. For our listeners, if somebody wants to, or any of you want to ping us and tell us, and if you have those images of Department 82, aka Impulse, over the course of years, if you want to school us, we'd be happy to have you on and chat with us and feature it here.
Post on our Instagram feed.
Absolutely. And Matthew just, stoked an personal emotion of mine here, and I'd love to see this actually play out. But as we wrap up here, I want to remind our listeners you can find all our content on cpgguys.com. And when you get there, if you scroll down, you can see we're on Instagram, our podcasting platforms, which you can also find on tinyurl.com/Apple CPG podcast, which is the podcast actually on the Apple platform. While you're there, Peter and I would really appreciate it if you would leave us a rating and perhaps a review and tell us how we're doing. We want to thank all of you for the love you've shown us and how fast this ecosystem of friends, partnerships, etc. have grown. I want to thank you, Matthew, for being kind enough and imparting wisdom to us on what's going on in the wonderful world of Walmart media. My humble personal opinion, and I can't be talked out of it. The road to success for a brand in retail was, is, and always will be a partnership with Walmart. So this is a very important personal close topic. So I want to thank Peter, you as well, for being my amazing comic relief co-host every single episode and for bringing the words of wisdom that make me laugh every day. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, this was terrific, but there was so much that came out of today. I've totally forgot. Matthew, can you remind me of the URL that people go to if they want to learn more about your solutions?
We have a cheer that starts with "Give me a W," right? But I won't subject you guys to that. I'll just say walmartmedia.com. You can find everything you'd like to know, and a very willing person at the other end of the line to take your inbound. So I'll say, for anyone not watching this on YouTube and just listening to the podcast, you've missed some pretty spectacular bling from Sri and Peter in the form of T-shirts. So I don't know if you guys give those away to the listeners, but shameless plug for that. And I'll end on a joke, which is that we say EDLC, everyday low cost at Walmart. I'm actually wearing the world's most comfortable Walmart bling, which is a great sweatshirt, which this week we've been describing as not everyday low cotton, primo cotton. So thank you guys for having me. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate the chat, and I'll have to do it again. Unless you get hate mail, at which point I'm ready to step away.
Can't imagine.
And Matthew, I can't wait to have you back, because one of the things Peter and I were hoping you do is come back early next year once the holidays have settled and tell us how that season went, because we both feel this is going to be a spectacular year for the Walmart business in general and for the Walmart e-commerce business. And a large part of that will be how brands execute their campaigns in partnership with you on Walmart Media. So as a reminder to all of folks, check us out on cpgguys.com. You want to get in touch and understand the world of Walmart Media better. Matthew's already stated it. It's walmartmedia.com. And we look forward to having you back, Matthew. Thank you, Peter. And folks, we'll be back next week with more.
Thank you, lovers of retail.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.